First up to read is Rich Levy, who we all know is the executive director of Imprint, and he's also a mighty fine poet. So please give a hand for Rich Levy.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks so much to Dr. Lawson and her wonderful group, and thank you, Mayor Parker. I don't know about you all, but I think it's incredibly cool that we have a mayor who not only likes poetry, but writes it and admits it publicly. Unique in yet another wonderful way. I'm very fortunate. You know that ancient Chinese thought that all their politicians should be poets as well. They were very enlightened. The Greeks were a little skeptical. You know, Plato said that poets are dangerous. And look where the Greeks are today, and look where the Chinese are today. And thanks also to Fran and Mike and Robin and Tony and Carolyn. This is really a bold venture, and thanks for doing it. It's really nice. So I thought I'd start with a poem. I too have children, and I think a lot about that sort of thing in my writing. This is a poem about my mother, thinking back to just kind of staying up late at night, which I still do, and which she did. It's called Kindred Spirit. I like this time of night when everyone else is asleep or fidgeting, and I realize my mother liked it too. She was always awake when we drifted off in that shoebox of a house, my father snorting like a hooked fish, the greatest generation versus the unconscious, my sister laughing and shifting on her narrow bed. I could hear mother's bathwater running, her footsteps in the hall, her sigh as she lowered into the tub, could see a sliver of light beneath the door before I fell into dreams. She's dead now, but wasn't this comforting? And aren't I comforting others too as I cruise the house, locking doors, wiping countertops, putting away the last of the bread and the milk, trading sleep for a swept floor and a few minutes among the dozing, like a self-conscious apple in the fridge. These nocturnal gambols are a secret I share with my mother only in the solitude of memory, and now I'm sharing it with you. Let's see. 6 minutes. I'm keeping an eye on that. My youngest child is here, and in her honor, in Laura's honor, here's a poem called Humpty Dad. This has to do with one of the many humiliations of being a father, especially a father who occasionally misses a necessary event. In this case, breakfast with Dad, which they have at school, you know, breakfast with Dad. The dads in the audience will know about these things. And the moms too. There's usually breakfast with mom, just to be fair. Darling girl, Humpty Dad, excuse me. Darling girl, how do I apologize for missing breakfast with Dad? First with a kiss that I imagine you accept with grace and without pause, which makes me see how much there is to do, how large my failures and omissions are, how guilt looms with its shadows and winds. The world sharpens in this winter light, the jumble of papers on my desk, the pall of the computer screen, dark green okra in my soup at lunch, sleek hexagons of seed, a blotch of surface oil. The chilies render a bead of sweat that rolls like a single trumpet note down my nose. So be it. The main thing is to move from here to there, outside this restaurant, where 3 men pour new curves and a pregnant woman in hard hat and vest waves an orange flag. Things are constantly falling apart. In my mind, I take the highway to the door of your school, your classroom, where you work with the tiny Ms. Perez, head down, deep in a problem. When you look up, I study your face to see if you're even close to solving the equation that serves as one of many lessons in disappointment. My guess is you're not. How many people in here have done something they're ashamed of? Right? God bless you. Thank you. We can all talk about this later. And if you're not, you should be ashamed of yourself. So I thought it would be good. It's about time that shame had its own poem. And in this poem, shame is my partner in crime. And it's called, surprisingly enough, Shame. I drag my shame outside for a walk because it needs a little air, and we head for the quaint shopping district, where my shame and I can make a round of the plaza, ringed with open-air cafes and maybe stop for a drink. At first I wonder why people are looking at us, but then I look down and get it. My shame, after all, exudes a certain odor, sweats profusely, and it's difficult to tell exactly what it looks like, or how tall it is, or even what sex it is. Suddenly I feel it twitching, as if it's about to make a run for it, which makes me grab its hand, or what passes for a hand. So now my shame and I are walking hand in whatever by the shop windows, and we can see our reflection, and I watch us pretending not to look. Oh, how shameful my shame is. But this time together has brought us closer. And now my arm's around its shoulder. And I'm no longer in a hurry, and the air feels so fresh, and the sunlight so soft, that I turn to my shame and say, hey. And my shame gives me, through what I think are its eyes, such a look of pity that I jam my hands in my pockets, we skip the cafe, and I try to lose it in the crowd. By the time I reach my front door, I am breathing hard, and I don't see my shame anymore. I have dinner with the children, my wife gives me a kiss, I lock the doors and shut the lights. But in the bathroom that night, as I brush my teeth and look into the mirror, there it is, staring at me, stubborn, hairy, stout, and I'm not sure why I find it so attractive. Thank you. Round two. You guys are brave. All right. I'm going to start off with a little poem. I promise to keep to the time this time. Some people are not very obedient. This is, I was eating a peach one day, and I thought about death. It's typical. It happens all the time. Fruit brings on these considerations. And this is one of those fruit poems. It's called Daydream. It's very short. It'll be over before you know it soon. Be careful. Daydream. Yeah, peaches. They're small. Daydream. I will die like a peach from the inside out, soft tissue darkening, drying, flaking apart, losing what sweetness it had. There will be no remedy for this rotting, but I won't lose my pit to decay, holding fast with the pink strings of my will to a hard center, a seed, little dancing homunculus, its desires and secret fatigue intact. The moon is often shamelessly written about, and I'm not exempt from that, as you know, in that earlier poem, Capable of Shame. This is a poem called Moon, and it overuses the word moon. intentionally. I just want you to know that. Let's have that known up front. Moon. When I looked up at the moon last night, white button floating on a puddle, I love the world and the moon. Melon moon, animal moon, trinket moon. I am desperate for the moon to be more than the moon, yet in its current gorgeous state, it will most likely remain moon-like, and we will continue to moon at it and love it as the moon. Same for the world. To love it, to not want it to be other than what it is, our pet planet, our dimpled and gamey home, we must say, fine, as if the haggling is finally over. We'll take it as is, parched and wobbly, and not let on to anyone how badly we want it, how much the world is to us, how beloved. O fullness, O hunk of moon, and the world dwindling, and the world below, hang on. O fullness, O hunk of moon, and world below the dwindling lamp of moon. Candle, candle holder. All right, last poem. This is called Self-Portrait in the Dark. This is about, well, it uses as a launching off point, I should say, being in the backyard with your dog, waiting for her to relieve herself. Self-Portrait in the Dark. And it uses a little French, nature morte, which is a pretentious way of saying still life, so sorry about that. Self-Portrait in the Dark. In the backyard with the dog, waiting for her to pee, I look at our house and know the heartache of voyeurs. There's our life, framed, bright, fronting the false glow of order, each bookshelf looking from this distance like a kind of military unit, the old globes charting pre-lapsarian worlds when Russia owned a brand, an empire. Africa was a pastel puzzle of nations, the seas cerulean and flat. Even the kitchen is une nature morte, appliances hunched on counters, a dirty plate and knife summarizing our last moments together. From here, this could be the end of a play. 10-year-old boy on sofa building something unseen, 12-year-old girl answering the phone and running with it, stage up. And on the TV, barely visible from this angle, the lumpy plumes of bombs rise and spread, buildings crumble, planes hang in a blank sky. The house seems to tremble. Thank you all for being here, really.
Our next poet, thank you, Rich, by the way, that was great. Our next poet is Eva Skrandy, who started life in Cuba, grew up in Miami, and came here where she obtained a PhD from the renowned creative writing department at the University of Houston. Please give a warm welcome to Eva Skrandy.
It's really wonderful to be here celebrating poetry. I too am amazed that we have a mayor who not only loves poetry but gets it. And I just want to say I forgot to send Fran a little introduction about myself, so I want to do it here because it's a plug for my school. I love poetry. This is what you would have said, Fran. Okay. That I love poetry more than anything else in the world, except for baseball. But to that end, believe it or not, there was never a writing program at the high school level in HISD. And so in order to spread the word of poetry and to get everybody else to love it, I mentioned it to the principal of Spur High School. and I am proud to say that Furr High School has the first creative writing magnet at the high school level in HISD. And I think I'm going to ask the mayor to come read for my students. Poetry does wonderful things. The Furr High School football team was losing, and they won more games this year than they've ever won, and that's because one of the players writes poetry. Okay, I'm not sure I need this when I read, so this is called, I do need it? Okay, The Holy Tree. When the wind goes through the tree of the soul, it looks like a ribbon winding through a woman's hair. The fruits, persimmon, mulberry, pear, fall off one at a time. Then it is possible to see the fish in the center of the tree. The lucky ones are able to see the fish opening and closing its mouth. Like children, they don't question this miracle. Some come and bury clocks near the tree's roots, hoping to live forever. This is where the beggars come, where their pockets begin to sprout. Some say prayer has built a nest in this tree. I believe this because of the blind birds that come out of it flying straight. This is called The Sheep. When it is evening and the sheep knock at the door, I know you are near. That you have jumped out of the corn to read the century and her 7 grains. O river, your scent and I collapse in the braille of evening's husks. You undo my wooden heart with your mountains. Gentle barn that drinks my hair, that laps at my toes like the voices of brides. O lips that rain gently over fire and night. Cities of midwives and wheat rise from our fields to save what is innocent among baskets filled with the hollows of history. You know, throughout history, there have been a ton of poems written to the onion. I don't get it. The one that comes to mind is Miguel Hernandez's poem, The Onion, and it had to do with the fact that when he was in jail, you know, a lot of the poets from Spain in the early 20th century were jailed because of their participation in the Civil War. And all he could do was eat onions, or look forward to eating an onion, one of those. So I've written a poem called The Onion too. Let us go to the onion, urges a rustling in the chest of the river. Daughter of the river, she is the pond we pick from between the breath and death of destiny. O goddess in a kingdom of mothers whose ankles never forsake the partridges of fog, the dawn of horses breaks open just for her. She is the fragile prophet in a land of desert and death. All 4 corners of justice speak her name. Olive trees dressed in the rites of oblivion, she will help you escape the stonecutter's scythe. O goddess of longitudes and latitudes, who lets ships drink her consolation during their nights of candles and waves. O queen of the earth's bitter roots, who for Cupid's sake promises to feed the tropical winds, for whom the night and milk marry, for whom the violins in history are fruitful and multiply. Thank you. I forgot to read the title poem of my book. I want to give you a little bit of background about how it started, because you know what? I think if you do write poetry, then teaching is like the sister of writing poetry. And actually, I got this title from reading a book by my very, very first student at a summer day camp. No, at a summer sleepaway camp. Anyways, my parents' generation of Cubans was glad to get the hell out of there. And my generation is very nostalgic about it, extremely nostalgic. And my parents' generation asks, well, what did you lose in Cuba? And I finally realized that I lost what could have been. And I was reading Andrew Solomon. He wrote The Noonday Demon, and he wrote a book of fiction called The Iron Boat. He had a poem, a chapter in there called My Mother's Paris. And the writing was so lyrical that I had to put down the book, and I started writing my poem. And I decided to call it My Mother's Cuba. Miami envied my mother's Cuba, her large, suave waves, because of her gulf, her ocean, her sea, because she wore the green fronds circling her face in a bun tied softly at the base of her neck, like a valley at the nape of a mountain. The air of my mother's Cuba danced in the plazas while kissing the lips of those that might marry islands, an island that proudly raised her leg back while kissing, the nightclub's sparkling lights on the heels of her shoes. My mother's Cuba had big lips and eyebrows, the kind captured in portraits of right shoulders or landscapes where what settles beyond the horizon is pink with hope, where breezes plan the arithmetic of banks, and the bones of the dead don't pull the dirt down like long skirts of sadness, where the knowledge in the university is as blue and green as the water, and thoughts are yellowtail snappers, angelfish, and blue tilapias, colorful fish that have never known an eclipse of old roses. And Miami, if my mother's Cuba even thinks of it, is not yet the future, is only a beautiful melange of eyes. It's not yet the place where the moon is the emigre's dark baggage. My mother's Cuba crosses her legs because at the police station, the only evidence is joy. And she is young, and her trees bear fruit, and her eyes sugar. One minute? Well, I guess I won't read my moon poem that was intentionally called 2 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, I'll read my moon poem. Moon. This is intentionally called Moon. Moon, I could be your tree, the one without any leaves, whose branches curve over the heads of mountains and timberline banks, looking for you among the sailboats and other prophets of the southern hemisphere, then heading north to find my leaves among age-old islands of giants and shadows. I know why we miss each other, because you're searching for me too, and our compasses stop along the way to mate with buoys, to lick centuries of shells. We're always behind one another, a perpetual game of cat and mouse, of hemisphere chasing hemisphere. How long till the bridges forget their language of opening and closing? How long till the earth gets tired and the eyelid of circumstance eclipses us? Do I have time for one more? Yeah. Okay, one more, a new poem. The Milkman of History. I am the milkman of history. I leave milk on the back steps of the house of pacifists. My bottles extend like wheat in tall dress. They receive their calling from ionic columns, to hear my angels shake well. I am the tendency toward evil. I make the milk bottles sneeze in the hands of martyrs, and dolphins tell lies in the courts of oceans and hope. On a good day, everything in pawn shops will be returned to their proper finches. On a bad day, I will spill, and tulips will cry over me. I boil over the stoves of jailed trees and leave tire marks over green pastures. On a good day, I will be like the milkman turning the great steering wheel away from the mustaches of dictators toward the back doors of Plentiful. Thank you.
And now for something a little different. A talented spoken word poet and slam master who has performed in over 25 states and Canada. It is my pleasure to introduce Deborah Wiggins, known as Dee.
Hello everybody. How you guys doing today? I'm kind of tall, so I'm make this a little different. So I do write performance poetry as well as page work as well. And for those of you who are not familiar with poetry or with slam poetry is competitive poetry where artists are given 3 minutes to compete with a poem that's read or performed out loud, and they're scored by members of the audience. And so I have some work with that as well as just doing more performance poetry, which while on the page is beautiful and eloquent, we like to try to take some more theatrical approach to it, and so kind of making it a little more interactive. So I may scare you all, and that's okay. So, one thing that I love about this reading is that it's so many people who love the same thing that I love, right? And I think at times as we begin to progress as artists and just throughout life, the general idea of just being in love with something becomes not as enamoring as it was before. And so my first poem is going to be a little bit about love. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So my friend Miriam tells me that she's in love. After memberships with 5 internet dating sites, enough blogs and profiles that Google sends her a monthly check, and an epic scrapbook of frog lips as mementos of forgiven but not forgotten failures, how are you so sure this time? I reply through a voice box lined with skepticism. She says, I know because when he leaves the room, I can't breathe as well. And I emancipated a full lungful of air. Convinced that the hypnotic inhale-exhale pattern couldn't be broken, I guess I'm the one who's forgetting. I'm forgetting what it feels like to be breathless. Cheeks as roses are red, stomach violently blue like a burial ground for butterflies who mistakenly strangled to death on my sternum in an attempt to access my heart. I envy their lack of direction. Someone just give me some misdirection. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday to asphyxiate me today. Reach your hand to my ribcage. Use my lungs like angel's wings. Pretend we are cupids. We will float around a ballroom like 2 ballerinas, tights of insecurity, trapped on an untouching path, wanting to break our legs for a kiss. To be paraplegics in a bed 20 degrees below naked, limbs stacked like pickup sticks. Do you remember what it was like to turn our bodies into a childhood game and an elderly fear simultaneously? I live in that moment, embracing arthritis as reason to be bent to your every whim. I want to dip my toes in liquor and dare you drunk on my footsteps. Let's hyperventilate for all of Hollywood to know. Leave your handprints on a star in my bones. Inscribe infinity in your poems and touch me immortal. Make me forget my bills for the moment I spent gasping for air while holding your hand, watching the sunrise in a park drown me in a hailstorm of rose petals. Knock some sense into me. Beckon me to stand before you in the afterglow of nudity and the precursor to the morning, clutching myself like an inexpensive handbag, wanting just to be an accessory to your already coordinated life. Would it be easier to love me if I had alligator skin? Hippopotamus lips, beta gills. I give my lungs to be a fish out of water, flopping on the decks of your Titanic, destined to be submerged again in your presence. So this morning I dropped my asthma inhaler in an attempt to feel you closer, or at least be winded enough not to know the difference. Hope desperation be lodged in my throat, ran a mile at the speed of infatuation, face fade to azure hue, dizzy hoping death or life or love would approach and steal the breath from my quivering lips, leaving me unable to move or speak, but numbed, but finally, breathless. That I actually have a book I was having a hard time getting it from my publisher, so unfortunately I don't have it today, but I have some printed work in the back, and so I'm just going to read one of them, and they're available for purchase as well. And it's called For the Journey. If all I can take with me is the fading impression of your smile in my breastbone, I will wear your elation like a vintage evening gown, the lace blush of first touch disguising exposed, flawed imperfections. If the only baggage allowable is the frigid impression of your absent breath on bareness of earlobe backs, I will hold your recollection, a winter evening exhale, Forced mortality to expel you from me in the dusk of Detroit's December. If time comes too quickly to pack memories, I will recall your scent at Euphoria's residence, slumber with the account of a single midnight kiss, boast the curl of your morning breath in my eyelashes, wear your secondhand pheromones in my skin, and temper the earth beneath my feet to erode in the pattern of your footsteps with every heavy, laden step I bear. Into the evening, I finally come home.
In 2008, Deep performed at the Women of the World National Poetry Slam and was ranked the #2 best female poet in the world. So, let's hear it for you.
I don't have a moon poem. So I'm gonna go with this. Throughout my childhood, I remember my father like nighttime. He spent all day behind corporate clouds parading computer concepts to foreign lands before deciding to return to this land he called home. But when he arrived, he was spectacular. Stars clasped in the firmament of his hands in the shapes of B2 bomber earrings for me, his baby girl. Unable to enjoy moonlights because of bedtimes, I shrunk into bed, my Big Dipper dad pouring fables into my ears as I went off to dreamland, where I imagined it was always night. My dad always had a little more time to sing me back awake to enjoy the glistening meteors in his eyes for a few more hours. But the carpool used to take him while I was sleeping. At 4 a.m., I would be peeking over the landing of the staircase, watching him trade places with my son mother for the day shift. She hardly had time to spend kissing the dusk as he rushed to make sure the other side of the planet got to see his majestic mystery, but we hardly got to experience his brilliance before he was gone. So for my mother and me, I wished for the dawn where they both existed, straddling the fence of the morning and the backside of the night, sounding something like the weekend where my crescent father would peek from behind cotton ball cumuli to ride bikes down Eucalyptus Street. One hand holding my bicycle seat, the other steering between constellations, me hands-free trusting that the exhilaration of nightlife would never let me down. But his presence returned into the week like Halley's Comet into space. And us, his family, became onlookers, hoping that this week's 76 years would pass faster than the last 3 days and bring my father back home again. So we blew kisses to the wind, and he left Orion's belt to discipline, and for the next 5 days he became a vapor, painting magnificent sunrises with his dirty clothing so we knew he'd been home even though we'd missed him. And when the calling came, he became church all day like Sundays, stretching out those mornings into our evenings, and those long summer afternoons joined hands so I could only see my father between the pews, between the congregation's request and the news where he would collapse, and I would rise and fall on his chest just to feel his breath when he snored. And I became cold like the shadow of my father leaving because his back was how I recognized him. He was registered father on my birth certificate but had been absentee voting for years, catching highlights of my choir performances with videotapes and cheers my mom tried to make loud enough to fill the space where your voice should have been. You were so concerned with us becoming homeless that you forgot we were home, less one father at mealtimes. Me trying to find a glimmer of your laughter in my chicken and stars, but they couldn't shine like you. And no matter how old I grew, I could never find a man like you. To this day, I spend my evenings wandering the streets, begging for a glimpse of your approval. I yearn for fall solstice because it's the only time I can have one more hour of you. My nighttime. And it's time I said something because I don't know if I've ever told you how much I miss the evenings when the mornings come. And I can't count how many times I forsook the sunsets to punch the skylines for your absence, praying they would remind your soul that your baby girl is still waiting for her daddy to come home. Most people, after that, I decided I'm going to escape my family and run away to college, and and to then run away from California to Houston by myself and try to live here, because that sounded like a good idea. So, and I found myself very homeless when I got here, because there was a whole new culture and a whole new set of rules and a whole new way that I didn't even understand. And so, from that, I wrote this poem. Today, I'm eating lunch at a 5-star hotel. Braised salmon, eggplant parmesan, tortellini tossed in olive oil, those breadsticks, you guys know those really good garlic breadsticks, still hot from the oven. And the entire meal, all I've been wondering is, How I could extract that warmth that line the inner workings of my hands just so I could feel alive tonight. I've never been what homelessness looks like. Always owned a business suit, never held a cardboard sign, but knew how to hike up a business route. My hands filled with the keys to success with no opportune doors to open. Like a key card to a room that never gives me the green light. I wait in stop sign lobbies impersonating someone who wants to stay. Like my accelerating ambition would ever let me. Truth is, these luxurious suites are stale yellow. Only serve you continental breakfast if you're a guest in them. Only provide lunch to corporate employees who have it all together. But what would they say if they knew that everything that I could put my name on sleeps in a storage shed? That a single suitcase and a borrowed couch are what I call home these days. I don't belong here. Sure, my mother taught me what fork to use, but she didn't teach me what to do when there was a fork in the road and you err in the side of passion. Pack your dreams in a U-Haul painted with a NASA rocket on its side. Blast off believing that the rest stop is closer than you think. That the stars in your heart will shine brighter with your Texas-sized goals in the distance till you realize this valley goes deeper than you knew. Bigger isn't always better when you're measuring the distance between where you are and where you're headed. Do you know what it's like to hold on to a single pair of shoes for 10 years and 5 moves because they were the last place you felt confident standing upright? I know what it's like to tighten your bootstraps and hope for a break just to pull yourself up. Ledges aren't that easy to come by when you're not jumping off them. My chasm has held no less than 3 jobs at any given time, has never accepted drug or alcohol addictions, provides a shower for me daily. But every time I lay down, every time I unpack my pillow to dream, all I see is foreclosed signs, as if home is not a place intended for me. They say the average American is a single paycheck away from being homeless. That's 1 vacation day too long. 1 boss who thinks you're over-efficient. 1 night that the bills begin to fight over whose fault they are, and so the money runs out on them. You'll pick up a few extra gigs to stop the arguing, work yourself into a stretcher visit. The nurses will wheel you down the hall, bloodless and stamped 80% HMO played. Place needles in investments you didn't know that you had. Lock you in a cold-lit, loneless room where you'll find yourself void of emotion and numb, and you will know that the rent is past due. That your well-managed credit score is falling, that the last bit of food that you could afford is going bad while you lay there unproductive. You will hope that the chicken broth tastes like a paycheck or at the very least a lawsuit. You will convince them to release you early, beg to return to work with fresh bruises and light bleeding. You will wear long sleeves so that your boss doesn't ask questions, and you will eat the meal they provide the first few days of training like it's your last supper. Hold your tongue. You will not sound homeless. Be full of pity but never pitiful. Keep your clean blazer button tight. Make sure not to soil or wrinkle your good clothes. There are no iron outlets in your back seat, your closet. Hold your head up. Use the right fork. Place the napkin in your lap. You will not look homeless either. You're in a 5-star hotel. You're surrounded by success. Make them believe that you deserve to be here. Never inch, never flinch, never look as bad as things really are, because that would be unprofessional. We have a world to change.
Martha Serpas is a native of South Louisiana and cares deeply about its bayous and wetlands. She teaches creative writing at the University of Houston and is also a hospital trauma chaplain. Martha Serpas.
I'm really grateful to be here and to all of you for coming, and to all the champions who Rich mentioned earlier. The first poem I want to read for you comes out of my hospital experience. It's called Pearl Snap. Education is the answer to our social woes, and not the get a good job after high school, but the deep plodding kind, the making of many books kind, the get everybody together to debate the big questions kind. When I'm in Walmart and some kid dangling by the wrist is screaming, his mom in shorts that slice her thighs, saying something deep to him through her teeth, her long hair smelling like she has more than one job, I know it's not her fault. She's carrying a combination wallet cigarette case with a pocket for the lighter. Her husband, well, the father of her last 2, her divorce isn't final from her ex, is waiting in the truck, a Ford. Her dad had a problem with that until they went duck hunting and worked it all out. Her man didn't graduate, even though his junior high let the boys go when trawling season began, but each year got a lot harder. She took typing and bookkeeping and even AP math. She says she manages a convenience store where you learn how to just take on the present. Right now, she just needs to find that pearl snap for her oldest. And why is it suddenly so dang hard to find a boy's 12 pearl snap? There are a few like her in every cow town. When the copter brings a woman's child, a certain woman of that kind, from the parish or the county to the city, and we all stand around the trauma bay watching environmental services sweep up the gauze wrap and cut clothes, and that woman from the boonies is still not here, driving her husband's truck as hard and steady as she can. I'll meet her in family consult or stand her in the shiny hallway. She'll go anywhere. And depending on what the test tube intern has to say, she'll either squat, lay her forearm against her stomach, and loose that first wail groan that defies conceit. Or she'll tutor me in the language of living in good faith, of staring down what I have to say and opening her mind to it, taking it in like a nursling and knowing it whole until the two can sleep side by side. We tell her it's going to be a long road, and she says, as long as there's a road, I'm on it. And I can't believe I have an opportunity to thank the mayor. I could thank you for many things, but the one I want to thank you for is I'm a newcomer to Houston. And Houston is a much more welcoming place to me because of you, so thank you. This poem is called Finishing Touch. Ever since the painter depicted your finger extended to your creature, we have known we crave a surrogate touch. We press others' palms to our faces as if we were still being molded, polished by an apprentice love, revising our rougher destinies. Each hand found more skillful than the last, each imprint closer to your transforming seal. I know this, and still I have to ask for reprieve in illusion, to linger in this present flesh, believe in her finishing touch. Let this hand complete me for the stretch. The soft edges of these fingers be the last of earth I feel. Let it be her own hand, hers alone, that will close these eyes. Thank you. I'm going to read two poems from The Dirty Side of the Storm. Most of the poems are about the disappearance of my home, the slow disappearance of my home in southern Louisiana from human-made coastal erosion, made worse but not created by the BP Halliburton Transocean disaster. And I should say, I've never said this before, I've been hiding this. This image of the shopping cart in this next poem, it's really White Oak Bayou, it's not Louisiana. I just kind of stuck it in.
Idaho?
White Oak Bayou.
White Oak Bayou.
Psalm at high tide. Rain on the river's vinyl surface, water that glitters, water that hardly moves, its branches witness to trees, to fronds, leaves, crab floats, pilings, shopping carts, appliances. The divine earth takes everything in its wounded side and gives back wholeness. It bears the huddled profane and endures the soaking venerated in its wild swirls. This river fixed with wooden weirs, radiant in misshapen glory. If you wait long enough, right, people will clap. This poem is called Fado-Do, and a Fado-Do is a Cajun dance, and it literally means make sleep. attendees would bring children and just tell them to go to sleep around the edges of the dance floor. And I assume that's so that the dance could go on longer because nobody had to go home to check the kids. Fay-do-do. A green heron pulls the sky behind it like a zipper. Sharp rows of clouds fold into themselves, erasing the framed blue tide. Barrier islands disappear into the Gulf's gray mouth. Everywhere something strives to overtake something else. Grass over a mound of fill dirt, ants over grass. The rough shading of rust between rows of sheet metal frustrating the sky. Boats breast up 3 deep in every slip, and as soon docked, are waved away. The only music's crickets and lapping, happy bullfrogs on slick logs. A rustling skirt of palmettos around the roots of a modest oak that appear after hard rain. A fiddle, or idling motor, moves away. Go to sleep. God will come in an extended cab for all of us. The children, the dogs, the poets. That old adversary, the Gulf, our succoring mother, having given everything, will carry the whole of us away. Thank you.